Hey friends, so today I want to talk to you all about how I went from zero to $500,000 in just under a year from 2023 to 2024. It's been a fantastic experience for me, honestly, like ever since I got on LinkedIn and started growing my email list, everything changed for the better. But first, before I get into the three most important things that played a role, I want to do a little rewind to tell you a little bit of my story. So in 2019, I sort of was sat there in my girlfriend's attic when I pulled the trigger, left a 5K a month job in London to come back to Cyprus because my dad had some health issues. Our house got taken away by, unpaid debts and stuff. So I wanted to be closer to home and wanted to start my own agency as a web developer. I had been doing that for years in London. So I came back home and traded off for a 14,000 euro a year job just because I wanted to be closer to home and I knew it was a stepping stone to get there. So when I pulled the trigger in 2019 and sort of started my own agency, I had like 2,000 euros to my name. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I have some savings. And I went all over the shop. Like I was going through cold emails, cold calls, scrambling away to try to find things. It was myself with a laptop in this attic with my fiance now and a bunch of pets, right? We had 2 dogs, we had 3 cats, and I was just like, I'm doing this. And I went through everything you could imagine. Now, fast forward, obviously, I grew the team to 12 people. We were making like 100K a month. Everything was smooth, but I hated waking up to go to work every day. This thing wasn't for me. It was like burnout, stress, anxiety. We were building platforms, we were getting clients for 120K a year retainers. But I realized that, energetically, something didn't sit well with me. I was sort of waking up being really anxious because I hadn't slept. I had really, many requirements to meet and all of that. And I was like, something has to change. So we were also ghostwriting and doing email marketing and things for clients. And I was like the ghost behind bigger accounts on Twitter, on LinkedIn. I just didn't put myself out there. And the agency sort of, relied on word of mouth, on referrals. We tried paid ads here and there. Then we did SEO and we monetized locally. We're doing great. But I was sort of like, look at your happiness. The same way you let that job in London. Now you've built yourself your own rat race, which you don't want to wake up to. So I took a step back and I put myself up on LinkedIn, more so as a business coach at the intersection of my interests. Now that was copywriting, offer making, and sort of business strategy at the time. And I was listening to people like, Justin Welsh or Dan Coe or all of these people who were saying, write content, do this, do that. And I understood that because it had a very similar effect to our clients. So I put myself out there. Now I've thankfully grown an audience to like 42,000 on LinkedIn, have an email list of like 3,000 people. But fundamentally, a lot of people like either target beginners or they target people up down the ladder, but they don't tell you exactly what it is you have to do or, the ins and outs or the inside of what happens. So for me, it was essentially having a Calendly link attached to a Stripe, putting myself out there in the DMs, doing the outbound until my audience grew to like 2,000 to 3,000 followers, where I started getting a little bit of inbound to get there. But that entire thing opened up Modern Maker, which is a coaching program that I run. I've helped over 250 clients and 2,000 customers in the span of these 1 or 2 years achieve 6 figures, free themselves up and do what it is that they had in their own terms, whether that was, scaling down in the same methodology that I did, or begin and get their first client, their next client, and so on. And I went through heaven and hell, right? And it was tough. I had to figure things out and like apply to mentorship, got myself mentors and did everything that I could. So it comes down to the three things that I remember that I used to the core at Modern Maker. It's almost like my philosophy, modern makers power right. Modern makers go for simple over complex. And modern makers focus on the fundamentals. So looking back at the core, I won't get into the nitty gritty stuff, but it came down to the three things. So number one was a Google Doc offer. When I was at the agency, we were doing calls all the time. When I started Modern Maker, I was still getting on calls because I was taught that that was the way. But I realized that when you have a Google Doc offer, essentially, what are you doing? I know it sounds silly, but it's really simple. It's an amalgamation of all the things that you take during sales calls, whether that's objections, showing them the plan, committing to the promise, weaving out the weeds, and also linking their own hell and their heaven through the sales call and putting that in through text. So what do I mean by a Google Doc offer? A Google Doc offer is simply an invitation into your world to get a yes or a no. We're not hunting for maybe babies, right? All we're trying to do is bring together everything you learn in the sales call world, put it into text, and paint the picture. So when you have a clear promise, when you have a clear path that shows somebody how to get from A to B in that destination, and you also have the pricing relative to that present pain that they have, and then you reveal the features, right? So it's not as important to say how many coaching calls, how many resources you have. It's painting the picture of the promise, right, with the plan that's important. Then you would get more I'm-ins. So eventually what happened was having a clear Google Doc offer in my world enabled me to get off of the sales call wagon as I was suddenly selling through text. Now, obviously that came with the authority over time of showing up on LinkedIn, and I'm very grateful to have gotten to that place. But even before, so when I introduced Google Doc offers, it was a landing page. Then it was a Google Doc. I also tested Notion. It doesn't matter the actual tool that you use. What matters is having that clear step. And I started introducing it to get I went from 8 sales calls a day to 4 because I was getting yeses by sending the Google Doc. Then eventually I would do 2 sales calls and then 0, and progressively started getting people to commit to my Google Doc offer. And then once I freed up about 16 hours a week from my time, I went from, it was crazy. I think it was something like 12 to 16 hour work days to 4 to 6 hour work days. And obviously there's days where you work more, but that was all thanks to me introducing the Google Doc into the picture on the front end of an offer. And what happened there was I had all this free time to create, to put myself out there, to write more, to start my email list, and fundamentally be there for my clients, because when I was taking the sales calls, the delivery was suffering, right, in the coaching program. So Google Doc offers with a clear promise, a clear plan, and the pricing in relation to the present pain gets you those yeses. Now, I'm not here to tell you what to do, obviously. You find what works for you, and I'm only sharing my experience of what got me here. And fundamentally, the Google Docs were the number one thing that I did in the journey. And when I help my students, that's sort of the first thing we do, and they get to pick how they're going to do that. Number 2 is power writing. So I came from the email marketing background when I was doing the websites and landing pages and funnels for people. But when I look at copywriting, it's not so much about, the hooks or the formatting or the call to action and the fancy words. I coined the term power writing because modern makers write to shift beliefs. Now, what do I mean by that? Let's take an example. So if I was to say, here's 3 call to actions to help you get an inbound lead, that doesn't really mean much. I could Google that, right? But when you power write, essentially, and I'm still figuring out exactly what that means, but over time, it's can I shift someone's behavior from feeling X to feeling Y through words? So when we power write, we write content that provides insights, that gives value, that also gets someone to realize where they're at and that there's a different way of doing things. So power writing fundamentally at its core was like, can I take a liability that someone's already done and turn that into their most powerful asset? So for example, if we take a consultant who's doing consultations at Deloitte or Ernst & Young, their most valuable asset is their time, right? Because they're thinking and they have to show up in that one-to-one. So when you take that time, let's say this Deloitte person is overworked because he continuously has calls and in-person meetings, we can say, that thing you're already doing, which is the consultation, we can turn it into a video course that you can sell online and build leverage. Now, what I've done is I've taken his liability, which is his time, and turned it into an asset because now we have infinite time. We build a course, we build a program, and they're able to sell it. Now, through power writing, I would be writing to shift those beliefs. Now, the other side of power writing is something that I call dog whistling, right? Like a lot of creators online will say, build first, monetize later. What we did at like Modern Maker, which became a philosophy, is sell while you build, right? You can monetize as you're growing. You don't need to have the thing built. You could sell beforehand. So when I'm looking at power writing, I'm sort of saying, can I dog whistle to 5% of my audience instead of speaking broadly to 100% of my audience? So what happened even with me when I started on LinkedIn, I would talk broadly and attract, I grew something like 1,000 followers a month, and I went from 10K followers to like 20K in a matter of 3 weeks because I was riding the wave. But what happened was my bank account wasn't as filled as I wanted it to be because I was simply just attracting people who wanted the value. When I started dog whistling through the power writing framework, what happened was you like perk the ears of the dog that can hear the frequency, right? I know it sounds a little bit obscure, but that's what it is. So you look back and you find, what are the pain points? What are the aspirations? What are the wants and what are the fears of your ideal clients? And when you look at those, you are then only targeting them, right? So if I want to dog whistle to a beginner, I'm going to say how to get your first client online. The word get clients can be said in 3 different ways. If I'm talking to somebody intermediate and I dog whistle, I can say, how do you get clients consistently? So I'm still saying get clients, but I'm bolting on the word consistently, which means this person is now intermediate. Now, if I want to dog whistle by power writing to somebody more advanced, it could be how to get 5 clients a week consistently without sales calls. Can you see the difference? So what's happening here is we're using a dog whistle hook or a dog whistle methodology inside of power writing to shift their beliefs, to help them understand what they're truly getting here. So power writing for me was like almost looking at little fish and sharks in an ocean. Like, who do I want to speak to? How big is that fish? And what fish am I looking to attract? And then we're fixing sort of the bait in order to dog whistle the right words for this animal to hear us, right? And hopefully this analogy makes sense. And I know analogies put things on the surface. So we've had Google Doc offers, we've had power writing to shift beliefs, which in turn attracts inbound leads, right? Like, one thing I've forgotten to mention is that when we power write, obviously it comes in tiers. So the way that I broke down the way that I was power writing was to a very simple framework. I would teach, show, share, and invite in my content. So teaching was essentially everything that's locked in my head, all the knowledge, and I would teach people how to do something, how to get a client, how to package an offer, etc. The show content was showing things behind the scenes, like the unique models and the mechanisms that I use behind the scenes to do my work, right? Like how I set up an email funnel, how I essentially packaged Gumroad with a customer offer and a client offer, and how I did the upselling. That is simply the art of showing through demonstration. And demonstration simply gets you leads because people want to know exactly where you're at and what you're doing. And nobody can copy you, right? Because you're showing what you're doing behind the scenes. The other pillar was share content. So share content gets people to come to you based on your values, your beliefs, and your hobbies. So I would share that I'm running. I would share that I love watermelons. I would share that I hate Crocs because I'm Mr. Birkenstocks. I would also share that I like Google Docs and no sales calls on the business side. And anything I shared that was a hobby or an interest, I always tried to tie it in relation to business. And otherwise, I'm just another business coach or an email marketer, right? But if I'm an email marketer who likes running or who likes music, then people are naturally drawn to that because people buy into you before buying into what you do. So we've done teach, we've done show, we've done share. The last one is invite content. So invite content when we power write is the case studies and the testimonials that you put together in order to show proof, to prove your skill, to prove your competence into what you're doing. So every time that I was doing something like that, people would then see, oh, he can get a result for himself, or he's getting a result for a client. And, even at the beginning of the journey, your analytics, your story is your own competence, is your own invitation, right? Into proving that you're good at what you do. So what I was doing essentially was starting off on LinkedIn saying, here's how I grew an audience. Then here's how I got a lead. Then here's how I got a client. And then proving that I'm helping clients get other clients and showing those wins, for example. Now, why is it called invite? Because at the end of that, you can then make an invitation for someone to work with you or get off the platform or subscribe to your list or watch like a YouTube video. Just invite them off of where they are and into something else. So those are the key pillars of the content strategy of power writing, and we've touched on essentially how to shift beliefs and do all of that. Now, the last pillar of the 3 steps that got me this far is the proximity ladder. Now, when we look at offers as a whole, everybody says you can have different offers, you can offer different things, or you get coaches that say only sell high ticket or only sell low ticket. For me, what was vital, because at the web agency, I realized, we did SEO, we did copywriting, we did web design, we did web development. It was a series of all of these things that were multiple offers. So you had to give your attention and your resource to everything, right? And I'm not saying that doesn't work, but one fundamental change that I made was monetizing proximity to me. So I'm going to give you an example through the coaching space where I used to have multiple offers in there as well. Like you had a power hour, a clarity call, then you had a workshop, then you had, one-to-one coaching and group coaching and this and that and everything, and then consulting. What I did with the proximity ladder, it means essentially the closer you get to the person, the more money they pay. So I created this proximity ladder to monetize access to myself. So let's take the group coaching program, for example. Say it's $100 a week to have access to resources, to group calls, etc. Now, if somebody wanted to work in closer proximity to me, they would get access to the group, the resources, but also access to my calendar and Telegram to work with me closely, or WhatsApp or whatever it is. And then simply monetizing, the closer you got to me, the more you paid, but the faster we would get results. On the other end, if I'm doing a workshop internally for my group coaching program and I have an email list, I can give someone a day pass for $100 once off just to come in to partake in a workshop that interests them. But to me, like say I do the workshops on Tuesdays at 6 p.m., I was going to do that thing anyway from my community and my students, but now I'm inviting somebody outside for a once-off day pass. So the proximity to me is a once-off hour, whereas the group gets proximity to me in this setting, and then the one-to-ones get access to me in that setting. So what that did was it got me off of the hamster wheel, because all I'm doing now is monetizing how close you are. Whereas before I had to do multiple offers. So the proximity ladder opened up a crazy whirlpool of, money left on the table for me, because I realized people are willing to spend more, right? So then in the proximity ladder, I started going, okay, the difference between a lead to a client was what I was doing before, right? Getting some lead on an email or LinkedIn and try to get them on a sales call to turn them into a client. And they would pay in full, for example. All of a sudden, I was like, what if I put in the word customer in there and give someone a little bite-sized chunk of my universe, whether that was a resource or a workshop, a digital product, so I could then indoctrinate them in my universe, give them that bite, and then sell them the bigger thing. So I went from having a pool of leads where, 80% of them were unqualified, or I had to qualify them and all of that, which kept me on a different type of hamster wheel, to building a pool of customers in the middle where then I could pitch, get them to become a repeat customer by buying something else, or then pitch them a client offer to work with me in closer proximity. So this sort of left to right movement in the proximity ladder, it's simple as that. It's from left to right marketing. It's external marketing. Now, once I had a client, I would ascend them up or down the proximity ladder. But this was internal marketing by making offers to existing clients to simply say, you can work with me in closer proximity. So this, in a nutshell, this ladder created the ultimate leverage, because I'm able to check for buyer intent. I'm able to get somebody and meet them where they're at by making an invitation for a customer or a client offer, and then an even bigger offer. And then I started bolting on like partnerships with equity, done for you consulting. And that is like sort of the upper tier of the proximity ladder. So today, what we've covered, and I know it's been long, was essentially, let's summarize what we've done. We've done the Google Doc offers, we've done power writing, I've given you the strategy, and we've also talked about the proximity ladder. Now, all of this together, there's a lot more to it, but hopefully will give you some insight on where you can go and what you can do to start monetizing your audience, whether you're on Instagram, LinkedIn, email, or whatever it is. And I hope that was useful for you today. You can click subscribe. You can watch any other videos that I have, and hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments below.